This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant, and I think making his debut on SportsDay Insider, Mike Curtis covers the Mavericks for us and has been doing it now for a while. And we're happy to have Mike on. How's it going, man?
It's going good. It's going well. I'm here in New York City for the 2025 NBA draft. I hear there's a pretty popular guy that went to Duke who could be going to the Mavericks. So we'll see what happens.
Will they be able to call him something other than that kid from Duke now?
I think they've always been able to call him by name. They were just being pretty cautious, mainly Jason Kidd when he was doing his ring of radio and TV interviews.
Okay, all right. So this is a momentous time in the Mavericks history. There's no question about this. Of course, after the trade of Luka Doncic in February the 1st and the fallout from all of that, and then the bounce back to earn the 1.8% chance of getting the top pick and moving from 11th to 1. The first time in their history they'd won the lottery. Of all times for that to happen, I can't think of a better time than this one. This not only does this have the chance to heal not all the wounds left by the Luka Doncic trade, because there's a lot of people out there that still love Luka and will always love Luka. But the opportunity to get a player of this caliber coming in, if you read Jay Billis's analysis on ESPN today, and Jay Billis, a pretty insightful guy about college basketball in particular, and he keeps up with that. And also from the standpoint that he's a Duke guy himself, he called him the best Duke freshman ever, which covers some ground saying that. And then he also talked about his maturity and the fact that his game really has no weaknesses. There are things he can improve upon, but he does a little bit of everything. And he talks about his competitiveness and how it's off the charts, his maturity off the charts, his leadership, all of those things makes him the obvious choice. As he put it, in a draft that's supposed to be pretty good, he still calls it the Cooper Flagg draft. So that is saying a lot at this point. So, Mike, let's settle this once and for all. There's no chance they're going to screw this up and make a trade before that first pick comes up, is there?
You know what? It's funny you say that, because, and I'll reveal this to our listeners. The week before Luka Doncic was traded, I was doing a piece pretty much on the likelihood of every player down the roster getting traded, and I had next to Luka Doncic's name, no chance. we didn't print that. Obviously, thank you to our editor, Jamie Hancock, for tempering me down a little bit, but I didn't think that was possible, and I was wrong. I don't think that there's going to be a big chance that they're gonna trade this pick. I think Cooper Flagg is gonna be a Dallas Maverick. Everything from who I've spoken to, how the team has moved. He was the only pre-draft workout for the Mavericks. The Mavericks were his only visit before the draft. I think this is a partnership that's going to start tomorrow night. It's interesting because, like, Cooper Flagg, he's already been labeled a generational talent. He's known for his versatility on both ends of the floor. He's a guy who can put the ball on the floor, play defense, get his teammates involved. I think this is going to be a really good fit in Dallas.
Mike, I'm always the skeptic on rookie mania, I guess would be the right word. And listen, I know that Flagg is far and away considered the number one prospect in this draft, but I'm looking for you to either temper things a little bit or tell me if I should go out and buy a jersey. How much impact is a guy like him going to make this first year? He's had 1 year of college basketball. And this is not a team it's not going to have Kyrie Irving to start the year. So how much impact can he have in that first season for this team?
Yeah, I think it's a unique situation. As much impact as he or the Mavericks will allow him to have, I think. When you think about like the team that he's going to, most guys who are going number one, they're going to really bad teams and they're being asked to be the savior of that franchise. There's a lot of pressure put on that kid to kind of change things overnight. And they get ample opportunity to go out and make mistakes, play through them. When you look at a guy like Cooper Flagg, who could come into this situation, he's going to be surrounded with veteran players. He's going to be around two guys who were the number one pick in their respective drafts, and Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis. So he's going to have a community around him that's going to be able to kind of shield him from some of the things typical number one picks go through. He doesn't have to carry that burden or pressure to kind of change things around overnight. He just has to come in and do exactly what he's been doing his whole career. I think if he can do that, if he can play defense, if he can be tenacious on that end, which is what the Mavericks want, that's their whole defense wins championships first mentality nowadays. I think he's the perfect player for that. And if he's able to contribute anything on offense, that's just the icing on the cake. We know he can put the ball on the floor. He can score at the rim. He's a lob threat. If he's able to just use his talents that he already has, I think he'll be a good fit.
Do you guys both think that this makes them a legitimate playoff team in 2025, 2026?
Well, they were already a playoff team. This is a really good team. Even after losing Luka, we saw that when Anthony Davis came in and played 3/4 of that game. They were terrific. They are, in many ways, they were a more balanced team than they had been before with Anthony Davis because of the scoring you have inside and outside at that point, and not just on the lob threats. So adding him, they go from, to me, a playoff team and a good playoff team, a team that had a chance to get to the at least the conference finals. If Cooper Flagg plays like he should be able to play, if Kyrie Irving comes back from that injury, and that to me is the biggest question of all this, isn't it, Mike? Is like, when does he come back, and what is he like when he comes back? But up to that point,
huge question.
Well, of course it is, and I think the thing for me is it's almost good that Kyrie's out from the standpoint of Cooper being able to come in and he gets to. You don't have a situation where he can't assert himself because you want him to do that, right? You don't want him just to think, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Am I supposed to, to concede to Kyrie? Am I concede to Anthony Davis? I'm the third choice here. What do I do? Well, he gets a chance maybe to do a little bit more. And Mike, something that you brought up the other day, I wanted to ask you about is that you said that there's a possibility that Jason would run him at the point a little bit. And I think that sounds pretty logical given Jason's history and what he did with Anthony Davis in the very first game that he played here.
Yeah, Anthony Davis brought the ball up quite a bit during his debut February 8th against the Houston Rockets. Obviously, he played phenomenally until he went down with the injury there in the third quarter. But this is a guy in Jason Kidd who's been known to try unorthodox ways. He was one of the first NBA coaches to put the ball primarily in Giannis Antetokounmpo's hands. And that kind of unlocked his skill set early on in his career. And he's become the two-time MVP that we know him as now. When you think of a guy like Cooper Flagg, I spoke to Brian Scalabrine for the story that you just mentioned. And he told me a story when he was watching the draft lottery on May 12th when the Mavericks got the number one pick. He said the first thought that popped into his head was Jason Kidd is going to play him at the point. And it's an interesting concept because, like, Jason Kidd made a comment on one of the radio appearances he had over the last month. And he said he thinks Cooper's a guy who's positionless. He can play him anywhere from the 2 through small ball 5. Now, obviously, he didn't mention point guard during that comment, but I think it's definitely possible that we see a guy like Cooper bring the ball up, initiate offense, and get guys involved just because he has the skill set to do it. And from everyone I've spoken to just about his work ethic and his competitive nature, Um, if he wants to do something, he's going to try to do it, and he's not going to let like failure or a mistake deter him from trying to get better. If that's a part of his game, I think he's going to do everything in his power or in his nature to kind of perfect it.
All right, I don't want to, in our time we've got here, because we want to pack a lot of stuff about the Mavericks into this. We could talk about Cooper probably for 30 minutes. But I also want to talk about the Mavericks have reportedly signed Daniel Gafford to a 3-year extension, $60 million. Mike, were you surprised that they got that done? Because there was some question whether he might be dangled in a trade for a potential point guard while the Mavericks are waiting for Kyrie to get back.
Yeah, so yesterday was the day after the finals is the first day that teams can negotiate with their own free agents. So the Mavericks and Daniel Gafford have been in talks. They're nearing a deal. I'm not sure if that deal is set and agreed upon yet, but they're nearing a deal and he intends to sign it. But yeah, this is a move that pretty much secures and solidifies the Mavericks front court for this 3 to 4 year. It's probably a 3-year window. Win now window that they have with Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, and this core group that they have. But I think it was a really good move considering that we don't know how healthy Derek Lively is going to be. He's had injury issues during his first 2 seasons, and I think just having a guy like Daniel Gafford who can pretty much do the same thing. He's a rim runner, lob threat, rim protector. And he's very efficient around the rim. He's always up there in the top 2, top 3, top 4 in field goal percentage. So I think it was a really good move by the Mavericks. It's unclear what the contract looks like structurally. But I'm pretty sure there's some type of way that if the Mavericks still wanted to get off of that contract, they could look to move him for a different asset like a point guard you mentioned. But I think the Mavs think they can get a quality point guard without trading away Daniel Gafford or PJ Washington for that matter, which those two are their best assets this offseason.
Yeah, those guys certainly, when you're talking about, what Nico Harrison's tried to build all along is, of course, a defensive team, and PJ, until the addition of Cooper Flagg, is considered probably their best defender. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see to me who ends up being the better defender across the board. Will it be PJ? Will it be Flagg? But at least you have 2 guys of that caliber now on your roster, or you will after this draft. So at this point, we're talking about Kyrie. Give us the timeline on whether he is has he already opted out of his contract, and are opting out so he can sign a new deal, and that give us a little update on the deadlines and all of that.
Yeah. So today is actually the deadline for Kyrie Irving and Dwight Powell to either exercise or decline their player options. Obviously, Kyrie Irving could enter the last year of that 3-year deal that he signed when he first got to Dallas, and it's unclear right now whether he plans to opt out or opt in. The deadline is 4:00 p.m. Central Time, so I'm not sure by the time this comes out, he may or may not have already made that decision. But as of right now, we're not quite sure what he plans to do. But if he does opt into it, then he can obviously negotiate a new deal with the Mavericks. And if he opts out, he can just become a free agent and negotiate an entire new deal that probably will align with this Daniel Gafford contract, that will align with Anthony Davis's 3-year deal 3 years that he has left on his contract. So all indications is Kyrie Irving is most likely going to be a Maverick by the time training camp starts this fall. It just depends on for how much is this contract going to be worth? How will they negotiate this extension? Those are the details that we still need to figure out. Because when you think about just what teams out there have cap space, you're going to look at the Brooklyn Nets, who's going to have the most, and then it's going to be the Detroit Pistons, depending on what they do with their own free agents. And I just don't see Kyrie leaving a situation like he has now to go to those teams.
Well, plus, I'm sure he doesn't know at this point, at this age, how this injury is going to impact him long term either, right? I don't see him gambling on himself. In other words, this year, I can see him opting out and then signing a new deal before, as you said, before training camp. I think it's in everybody's best interest to do that. But let me ask you about that, Mike, because we see athletes get this injury a lot. I don't know many of them who rely more on their quickness and speed than Kyrie Irving does. And so this would, to me, be a concern because usually when guys are coming back from this injury, it takes them about a year to really get back everything that they lost when they were hurt. What would you expect to see of Kyrie coming back this year?
Yeah. We all know what Kyrie's capable of when he's healthy. He's a prolific scorer. He can score a million different ways on the floor from every spot on the floor. He can finish at the rim. He can shoot the three. He does rely on his speed and quickness to get by defenders. Obviously, as he gets older, some of that just naturally declines. And even after a severe injury like this, it's hard to kind of guess that he'll be as quick than he was before he went down with the injury. So that is going to be what I'm looking for. How does he look in that first game out? I'm not expecting him to come out and score 30 points. Honestly, I think he'll try to ease his way back into the rotation. I don't think they're going to pressure him to just take that load. I think, honestly, that they would defer more to Anthony Davis, especially if Anthony Davis has been rolling throughout the season as that first option. I think they'll continue to try to feed AD, and if Flagg has grown into form by then, maybe he's still in the mix offensively. But I think it's going to be a process. I think the main thing is, can this team gel and mesh when Kyrie does return in enough time for the playoffs so they can just go on a run? That's going to be the biggest question. They're going to have to use that month and a half, 2 months, whatever it is, of the season that they have left to get ready for the playoffs.
Well, we certainly saw Kyrie when he played next to Luka, right? He deferred to him. I mean, over and over again. Sometimes too much so, but lots of times, especially in the first half, he let Luka get his points and kind of take over the offense, and then he would move in when he needed to do that. He's been, and I'll be the first to say, I wasn't sure what Kyrie was going to be like when he came here. There was all the baggage off the floor, right? That, we weren't sure about what he was going to be like. And I think he was a little defensive, maybe at first about all that. And then whatever happened, whether it was just being in Dallas, whether it was Nico Harrison, whether it was Jason Kidd, whatever it was, it's been a wonderful transition for him here. He seems very happy. And as you said, he's been a great player. And that's the thing, even at his age, when we talk about his, his quickness and his ability to see it up close is phenomenal. I mean, I don't know that there's many 20-year-olds out there who have the kind of quickness and ability to change a direction. It's the burst and then the stop, and his ability to do that is just phenomenal. I don't know. I've never seen a Maverick who had that change of direction like that, and it could to start and stop like he can. So that has been a huge addition to this team, and I do think that the second part of that for me with Kyrie is that his willingness to say, I don't need to be the main guy here. I can sit back and I can let somebody else get their points if that's what we need to do. I do think that there will be more of an onus on him now, obviously without Luka. But now that Cooper Flagg has come in, if he comes in and demonstrates, as Evan brought up a while ago, is he going to be ready to play right away or not? Is there going to be an adjustment period? He made a pretty good adjustment period for a guy who was supposed to be playing high school basketball last year and was playing at Duke at a very high level and got his team to the Final Four. So I would expect, because of kind of what we know about his work ethic, his competitiveness, that he is going to want, and because of his skill level, obviously, that he will probably make a pretty good impact. It'll just be a question to me of how he feels about, can I really, not whether can I do this? Because I think he knows that he can do it. It's a question of, should I do this? Should I step up here, or should I defer to Anthony Davis? Should I defer to Kyrie Irving? Should I defer to these other guys on the team and take my place and kind of work my way into it? Or do I come in and just play like I've always played? So, what else do we need to talk about on this team? Is there anything else that we're left? Oh, we got to talk about if you think that they're going to add a point guard here. Are they going to trade for a veteran? They're going to sign a veteran. Who are the options out there for the Mavericks before Kyrie gets back?
Yeah, it looked like Evan wanted to say something. I'm not sure if.
No, it was just gas.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, as far as point guards out there, obviously Chris Paul is a guy who's been thrown out there. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. Interesting thing about him, I know he's a veteran. I know he's one of the oldest players in the league, but he played all 82 games last year. And if it's anything that the Mavericks need, it's an experienced point guard who can kind of play with these veterans that they have, and it's health. If Chris Paul is able to be healthy, I think that's a pretty good option. And obviously he'll be able to kind of take a back seat once Kyrie does get healthy. If that is the case, he ends up in Dallas. Lonzo Ball is another option that's been tossed out there. He's currently with the Bulls. I think he has 1 year left on a $10 million contract. So there would have to be some type of trade in order to get him. And then a couple other options. Dennis Schroeder is going to be a free agent as well. It's unclear if Detroit wants to either keep him or let him test the market out. D'Angelo Russell's all out there as well, but I'm not sure how he fits with this team. So there are a few options out there. It just depends. Mavericks might even try to get creative and go after someone we're not thinking about. A guy like Drew Holiday, he just got traded last night from the Celtics to the Portland Trail Blazers for Anthony Simons. That's an interesting trade that I'm looking forward to seeing how it shapes out, especially in Boston, especially since Jason Tatum is going to be out for most of next year, that Achilles. So there are options out there.
Yeah, they're clearly making that deal, trying to get more scoring punch back, and then you're also dropping a big contract with the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics have some huge contracts to deal with. Tell me this: why did Dennis Schroeder, great defensive player? He seems to fit what the Mavericks would like to do as well from the point position. The guy's played, I think, with every team in the league so far, except the Mavericks. Why is it that he never sticks anywhere?
That's a good question. Last year, he was on 3 teams. Started the year in Brooklyn. He got traded to the Warriors, and then I think he got rerouted to Detroit. So, yeah, it's a guy who can't seemingly find an NBA home, at least permanently. We know he started his career in Atlanta. We know he's capable of being a really good backup guard. Like, he can score, he can facilitate. He kind of reminds you of like that Rondo type of prototype. I think he's a much better scorer than Rondo was, but it's interesting. I'm not sure if it's a culture fit. I'm not sure if it's how he interacts with teammates. I know people say like they hate playing against him, but once they're on his team, like it's a guy you want to be on your team. So I'm really not sure what it is with Dennis Schroeder. I've never covered him. Never even asked him a question like in an opposing press conference, but it is an interesting situation.
Well, those are the big things, right? As you mentioned too about Dwight Powell was also they're making a decision on him. Is this the end for Dwight Powell, or is he got a place on this team?
He actually intends to opt into his player option. I did forget to mention that. So he has a $4 million player option. It's last year of his contract, so he intends on opting into that contract.
Okay. So they're very front court heavy. They've got everybody in there in that group. Before we let you go over a couple other things here because of the addition of Cooper Flagg. What does this mean for a guy like Najee Marshall, who was a really terrific pickup for the Mavericks last year? He far exceeded any expectations I would have imagined for him offensively. I thought basically you thought you were getting a defensive player, and he ended up being a guy who was really, really good offensively. So how would this impact his minutes, do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting depending on if Cooper starts or if Cooper comes off the bench. if Cooper starts, does PJ Washington come off the bench? And PJ Washington and Najee have to kind of just, I don't want to say fight, but Jason Kidd's going to have to decide who's going to get more minutes out of the two. But it's going to be an interesting dynamic, especially because this is a rookie who's touted as a generational prospect. Is he going to come in and pretty much take over that starting small forward, power forward role? Probably not power forward because Anthony Davis and then you got Lively. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jason Kidd balances these minutes. But you talk about a guy like Najee Marshall. He played a little bit more point forward last year than I think anybody expected. And he was able to be successful in that role. I think Jason Kidd even started in the last 2 games of the season and play in tournament at point guard since they were out of options. But he's a guy that can create for himself, create for others. We know he has that patented right-hand floater that he was really successful at last year. So as long as he's still able to do those things in the minutes that he gets, I think he'll still be able to make an impact. And he's really good defensively as well. Not the defender we thought he would be, like guarding the best perimeter player on a nightly basis, but he's still solid from that end too.
So I guess if you're going to give Flagg some minutes at point guard, there's ways to make this all work with these guys. And I'm sure that's the way that Jason's going to try to sell it to these other guys, right? Is that everybody's going to still get their minutes? We're just going to be moving people around, or we're going to have more versatile pieces. I would expect that, and you mentioned that up top about the versatility of Flagg and what he's able to do and play any position, certainly guard any position, is that there'll be a lot of that on this team, right? There probably won't be as many assigned. This will impact Klay Thompson too, right? I mean, he's not going to be playing any small forward anymore, I don't imagine. So this is going to be a situation where Kyrie Irving may be the only guy on the floor with a set position when he comes back.
Yeah, I think so. And then when you look at some of the depth they have, you got guys like Jaden Hardy, Brandon Williams, Omax is still there on the bench as well. Some of those guys are going to be coming back from injuries. Like, do they have minutes for those guys? As of right now, it doesn't look like it unless they strike out in the point guard market. They have to rely on some of those guys when the season starts. So that's another thing to keep an eye out on.
Is that one last thing? Is Jaden Hardy a possibility for that role, a point guard?
It's interesting. Like he had his moments this season. Obviously, he was shooting the ball really well, especially December. But he suffered 3 separate right ankle injuries, and it kind of disrupted every time he built some momentum. He suffered an injury. So I think there will be an opportunity. I'm just not sure if it'll be as much as it was last season.
Yeah. Evan, you got anything left for Mike before he gets out?
No, Kevin, you ran through the entire NBA. So other than that, I think we're good. Mike, great work. I'm sorry. I was focused on draft stuff today, but it's a really good update on where the Mavericks are and their options going into the summer. And we're going to have you on much more as we get closer and into the season. But thanks, and enjoy the city, and we'll edit out the sirens in the background. It's always a telltale sign of when we're doing a podcast with somebody in New York, because the sirens are nonstop. But thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem at all. I didn't even hear the sirens. I was so locked in on our conversation.
Dialed in, man.
I like that. You're focused. You're focused, Mike. That makes you what the reporter that you are, bro. All right, it's great to have Mike Curtis on. We'll have him back here, as Evan has said. Thanks, Mike.
I appreciate you for having me.
All right, so Evan is in Baltimore. Have you had any crabs yet? I didn't ask if you got crabs. I was asking, have you eaten any crabs yet?
I did have a crab grilled cheese sandwich for lunch yesterday, and then I'm going to, as we speak, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to meet my old friend Thomas O'Toole, formerly of USA Today's sports department, for some crab down by the water. But Kevin, it is 100 degrees here. I mean, like, they're just pulling the crabs out of the water and they're already cooked.
They're already cooked. I like it.
It's amazing.
They're already cooked.
The heat index at first pitch last night 112 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because you factor in the humidity there, it just has to be off the charts.
I
Oh
know.
my.
It was not a pleasant scene in the press box, but we made it through. What was worse and more painful was watching this Rangers offense, which I grow more and more doubtful about with every day.
So Evan, give us just the to me the most significant stats about the Rangers this year, besides the fact they're last in everything offensively, are one, they have not come back to win any game in which they have had more than a 2-run deficit. And secondly, the ones that you cited last night from the game last night about what this team does after the 7th inning offensively.
Yeah, I mean it's stunning. I kind of got a bug around the 7th inning when I think the Rangers saw 6 pitches in a 6-0 loss to a guy that had never gone this deep into a game. And look, at that point in time, Trevor Rogers is throwing all strikes. I do get it, but it just made me start looking and thinking a little bit about this team's ability to come back, and the numbers just are stunning. They are last in the big leagues in pitches seen after the 7th inning, from the 7th inning on, last in walks, last in batting average, last in on base percentage, last in OPS. And this is why this team has won 3 games in which they were tied or trailed after 7 innings. To give you a little bit of perspective, Kevin, last year they won 18 games over the course of the season in which they were tied or trailed going to the 7th inning or after the 7th inning. This year they've won 3. They're on pace basically for 6 because we're basically at the midpoint. So that's a third of the ability to come back that they had on a team last year that was basically seen as an underachiever. One other stat on that: last year they won 36 games in which they trailed at any point in time during the season, during the game. This year they've won 10 of those games. So again, they're on pace for about 20. It's nearly a 50% drop in what they were able to do last year. And last year was a down year offensively as well. So I think that what I thought last night, maybe it was just the heat of the heat of the moment, pun intended, um, was that's as damning a stat about this team as anything. This is a team that just doesn't have an ability to come back.
No, they're not counter punchers. That's what I wrote about them for Sunday. They just don't seem to have that ability. And I don't want to dump on Wyatt Langford, who clearly is one of the top 2 or 3 players on this team, and has had a good year. He struggled lately, but he started to kind of bounce back a little bit. But when he told y'all after the game that this is it's really hard when you haven't been hitting the whole game to think that all of a sudden you're going to score 6 runs, in the 7th and 8th and 9th inning. I get what he's saying there. I get the fact that, you haven't done anything up to now. Why then? But it's like, but that's the thing about baseball is that each inning is its own separate entity, right? Anything can happen in any one of those innings. It's like the day before when the Rangers gave up 5 runs in an inning, right? They're just, anything can happen. And that's the attitude you have to have going into the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And so I'm not expecting Wyatt Langford at this point in his career, is still a very young player, to understand that, hey man, you just got to roll with it. And you have to always expect something else is going to happen here. I think that's an indictment of the leadership of this team, and I'm not going to put that on Wyatt Langford's lap. He's still too young to be assuming that kind of role, especially on a team with the $1 million middle infield. This is a time for those guys to be stepping up and doing something. And of course, especially in Corey Seager's case, he's not doing that at all.
No, I think you make a good point here. This is something that's got to be done at the player level. When this team functions the way a team should function, it's a really good team. But when they face any type of adversity, it seems like it just becomes too much of a hurdle for them to overcome. And I know there's still a lot of baseball left on the schedule. I'm not sure there's a lot of baseball left in the Rangers time frame before they have to make a decision about where they're headed, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I just haven't seen any signs. Like I think that the Rangers, I think the front office, I think everybody is looking for a sign from this offense to say, okay, something significant is moving in the right direction, and nothing ever appears. And it's just with each passing week, we add some other damning stat to the collection of indictment type stats of this team.
Well, even going to Pittsburgh, a bad team, you didn't have to face Paul Skeens, so one of the best pitchers in baseball. That you basically won the first two games because the Pirates handed those games, to you,
Right.
and then in the third game, you lost and didn't even look competitive. In
Well,
that
and
one.
you lost that game in a situation where you had an opportunity to either tack on or add a couple of runs, in the sixth inning, I think it was, and you let that opportunity get away, and the game then just spun out of control. And I really am concerned that this team's inability to come back is really it's really troublesome.
I just don't get it, Evan. This, of course, in 2023, and this is largely the same team, the same core players on this team as it was then. Maybe not all of them playing at the same level, starting with Evan Carter, but even he came in at the end of the season. He wasn't a player throughout that season. So when you have that kind of thing happen then, and when they just piled up runs on people, and then to go what happened last year when they had a significant regression, and then this year they regressed even more. It's like, if you keep this whole group together, what will it be next year?
Well, Kevin, to that point, this morning I did a little bit of research, and all of it keeps coming up. Every one of these things keeps coming up with this. Really, it's a 4-letter word, but it's a 5-letter word, if you know what I mean. It's that this team was a fluke in 23. Because if you look at, there were 7 players in 2023 that had at least 200 at bats for that club who have seen at least 1,000 pitches for the Rangers this year. So essentially, 7 regulars from or full time players that are still here. Of those 7 players, 1 player has a positive OPS from the start of 2024 compared to what his 2023 numbers were, and that's Josh Smith. Everybody else, and we're talking about Marcus Semien, Adolis Garcia, Jonah Hahn, Josh Young, Ezekiel Duran, and Corey Seager, every one of them, their OPS from the start of 2024 going forward is at least 97 points lower than what it was in 2023. I mean, that is a dramatic and drastic jump. And the best of that group is Josh Young. And Corey Seager has a 200-point drop. And look, he's still at 810 over the course of the last 2 years. But that's a big, big drop. You look at the guys like Semien, Garcia, and Heim, those are all 150-point drops for those guys. It's just, it's remarkable, and it suggests, once again, if you look at the Rangers in the 2 years before they won the World Series, they were a 90 and 100 loss team. You look at the Rangers in the 2 years since the World Series, they were a losing team, and they look like they're headed for a losing record again this year. And it just screams at you that the 2023 season was a fluke. And I think that's the only way you can diminish or demean that World Series championship is by ending up being labeled a fluke long term.
Yeah, it's an ugly thing to say, and I will say this too. I wrote a column early in 2024 about what if this team. I didn't say what if that was a fluke, but I just said if this team, basically I asked how long will the honeymoon last? If this team doesn't continue to perform like it did in a World Championship season, how will the fans respond to it? And I got a lot of blowback for that. People saying, "Oh, That's good enough for me forever. I got nothing else to ever ask of these Rangers. And it's like, no. That's not. You and I have had that discussion before. Like when the Braves in the '90s, they won one World Series, uh, and they were considered like baseball's great underachievers because they were in the playoffs every year. They were a great team, great rotation. But to me, I take that over winning one and then out. I mean, I want to. I want.
So the Marlins have won 2 World Series, and what has it done for that franchise?
Nothing. Nobody cares. You need to be competitive every year. You need to be in it. You need to be giving your fans a reason to have hope about watching this game tomorrow and the day after that, and the day after that. And this team, I think, as you wrote today and have written and I've written, there's nothing this team that it has shown us and more to the point, shown Chris Young that makes you believe in it. Why would you?
Well, the pitching does. The pitching makes you believe in them.
Well, the pitching does, absolutely, and but to me, that's the great crime of all of this. The Jacob deGrom has looked as great as he's ever been, and Nathan Eovaldi's pitching well, and Tyler Mahle was pitching well before he got hurt, and the bullpen has actually kind of held up okay, and better than okay. They still need a closer, but all of that part of it they've got, and they've never had that. Even on the World Series teams, their pitching was just average, at best. And now they've got that, and now they can't hit. And I, in the 40 years I've been around this team, they could always hit. There was never a question about that. They always had enough hitting, and for them not to have any now is just phenomenal. Especially as we talked about when you're paying your middle infield that much money for it. It's not like that these were a bunch of Rusty Greers that you were hoping they came up through this system and were nice players and good hitters, and you're hoping they're going to do it, and they're all overachievers. These guys aren't overachievers. Some of these guys, as in Wyatt Langford and Josh Young, they're first round picks.
They've got 6. They've got their save from. They've got their first round picks from 2018 through 23 all on the roster and active right now. Now, only 3 of those are obviously position players in Foscue, Langford, and Young. But yeah, to your point, they have drafted and they have brought players up through the system. I just don't know what to say about this team, other than I think it also risks. I think this is a column at some point in time for one of us. But if this continues, I wonder if this goes down as the biggest underachieving Rangers team in history. This particular version.
It'd be right up there. It certainly is in my estimation. I can't speak for the 72 to 84 teams.
Right.
For most of those teams were just terrible.
There was nothing expected of any of those teams.
No, they're not. And Billy Martin came in and he made a winner out of them that one season, and that was, but that they were considered overachievers then, certainly not underachievers. No, there's never been a time. Well, first of all, there's never been a time they won a World Series, and then you come and you're trying to defend that, right? You're always going to be looked at that point as if you're not even making the playoffs. Surely you're underachieving. So, how is this going to impact Chris Young's thinking then? I mean, you alluded to it earlier that he probably won't wait until the deadline to make a decision on this team.
I don't think he will wait until the deadline. I also think what's going to be interesting here is if this team doesn't respond, how aggressive or potentially drastic would he be when it comes to what he would do? And what I'm saying here is, if you're looking for the guys who would have the most value on the trade market and who would potentially bring you the most in return, we're talking about Nathan Eovaldi and Jacob deGrom. I don't think Chris Young has any desire or intent to trade either one of those guys. But if this team is going to rebuild, I mean, that's where the most value is. I think in all likelihood, the Rangers have until about the All-Star break to figure this out. Coming out of the break, right, they play Detroit for 3 games, so that's not going to be an easy task. And then a week later, they're on the road as the deadline looms. So I think Chris is probably going to have his mind made up, and this was the opportunity. They've played 16 consecutive games. It's going to run to 18 with the end of this Orioles series against teams that currently have losing records. And so far, they've done okay. They're 9-7 in those games, but they removed all margin of error with how badly they performed in the first 2 months. And so they needed to make hay here, and they haven't. And so I think it continues to push Chris towards a position where he says, okay, what do I do? Now, with Mally hurt, I don't know what his value is. I don't know if he'd be back before the trade deadline, and that would obviously be a big piece that they'd be willing to trade since he's in the last year of his deal. They've got some relievers that would have a little bit of value. I just don't know what their value pieces would be to trade that would start a significant makeover, unless again you say, hey, would the Rangers be so bold as to say, would anybody consider a Rafael Devers type trade with Corey Seager?
Yeah. I mean, really, at this point, Evan, everything you're talking about, and you're right. First of all, most teams are trading for pitching at the trade deadline. And so that's the one area that's performed well for the Rangers, and it doesn't do anything for you long term. If you're coming back next season with the same team, the same lineup, why would you expect anything different? I'm not expecting anything different. I'm not expecting anything different in the second half from these guys. I'm not expecting anything different next year. This is who they are. They might get marginally better, here and there, but they're not going to bounce back. They're not going to be like they were in 2023. So to me, Chris is going to have to consider some hard calls here. And maybe this is something you do after the season anyway. Maybe you trade a piece here, you trade a piece there at the deadline, a couple of pitchers, you get rid of them. I don't think he wants to get rid of Jacob deGrom. I think he had grand visions of what Jacob could bring to this team. He finally got that now, 2 years after the World Series. And I think there's certainly reason to believe that Jacob can come back and pitch well next year and the year after that. Look, there's not a lot of there's still a lot of tread left on that tire, right? Not a lot of mileage on that arm. He's had a couple of surgeries, but when he pitches, he looks just like he ever did, So I think that, to me, the hard decisions are going to be made after this season. And Chris Jones is going to look at this lineup and say, are these guys performing at the level I think they should at this point? And if not, and with the limitations that he has on the salary, because Ray Davis doesn't want to pay that tax, that puts him in a bad position to begin with, especially with these big contracts. Should he dump a couple of these contracts?
Well, and I don't think in the case of Corey Seager, I don't think you'd be quote unquote looking at a flat out dump, right? But even in a case like Seager, and to your point, I do think that if you're going to trade Seager, this is not Rafael Devers. This is not a situation where clearly Boston wanted to just move him. They wanted to move on from all that drama, apparently. If you're going to trade Seager and the rest of the $32.5 million he's due for the next 6 years, I do think that's the kind of deal that gets done with a longer window or a longer runway to negotiate, like there is in the winter.
Sure.
But on Seager, the question is now, look, you and I have talked about this, right? And I've said, look, Corey's still a very proficient shortstop. But you have also said, when's he going to move to first base? When's he going to move to first base? Because his range isn't great. He doesn't look as athletic as you'd like out there. I think he's performed well at shortstop. But my point here is, I think other teams that are going to acquire him and would be looking at the last half of that contract are going to be looking at him as a first baseman. And so does a $32.5 million first baseman or corner infielder, is that bring as much value as or have as much value as you would like? I don't know.
Well, I don't think it does. I think usually that's that kind of thing. When that trade gets made, you have to make financial concessions. When you're the seller, you're going to say, okay, we'll pick up so much of this, and maybe they'd be willing to do that if they decided they wanted to get off that contract. Marcus Semien isn't owed nearly as much and for as long. He is hitting now, but he's certainly gone through his funks as long as he's been here. And I guess what would could drive all this as well is what when is Sebastian Walcott going to be ready? Right? I mean, right now you could, if you were to trade Seager, and obviously we're bringing this up. It seems like we buried the lead. But if you're going to trade Seager, then Josh Smith could play shortstop, and he's proficient and certainly be good enough at that. Question being, as you brought up before about him, how would he hold up physically, playing, being a full-time shortstop, that kind of thing. But Walcott is the one big player, one big prospect left in that system right now. I mean, there are other guys who are considered nice players, but this is a guy who's a potential superstar.
But there is, Kevin, on that front, let me just say this, right? You do have Walcott, and he is still playing shortstop at Double-A Frisco, which to me is an indicator that the Rangers at least think the possibility of him playing shortstop in the big leagues is still a realistic possibility. If they were thinking that this guy could make any impact for them in the second half, I think he'd be playing of a playoff race. I think he'd be learning some outfield right now. But look at third. When you look at Josh Smith versus Josh Young over the last 2 years, Josh Smith has a 75-point OPS advantage. He's a 745 guy, and Young is a 684 guy. It's a 60-point advantage. But my point is, you may be looking at a situation where you play Sebastian Walcott at shortstop long term, and maybe Josh Smith becomes your third baseman if Josh Young doesn't turn it around.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, I had a conversation with one of our pals out there who's been in the game a long time and has been a coach and a scout and done a little bit of everything. And I just kind of went over some of the players, and we were talking about Josh Young, and I said, he was an all-star as a rookie, right? But I haven't seen that since. He's not played at an all-star level since then. What he looks like now is just a very league average third baseman, and maybe a little less than that. And he's obviously been hurt a lot, and that has been a factor. But he's played a lot this year. He's had a big enough window at this point in his career. If he's going to be something special, if he's going to be a perennial all-star, you'd be seeing that from him now. He played college. And now he has been in the league for a few years. He should be better than what he is right now. To me, he's one of the biggest disappointments. Of course, Adolis Garcia, we've talked about that before. I think, he's made a concerted effort to, pick up his defense in right field, and he's playing really nicely out there. He plays okay. But if you're going to have payroll questions, to me, it's not good enough to bring him back next year. I think these are legitimate concerns. Then when you talk about, they bring in, Chris Young brings in Higashioka, who hit 17 home runs for the Yankees last year, and he's hit one this year. Jake Berger, who hit 63 home runs of the last 2 seasons. He's got 10. It's just a team-wide epidemic. I don't know where you turn and look to anybody except for Wyatt Langford and Josh Smith as guys who are performing up to the level that you would expect of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's still some X factor or some wild card factor with Carter based on the amount of time he missed with the injury. I think even to some extent with Young, but the numbers with Young, he has played a lot this year. And look, since the start of the 24 season, Josh Young is a 249, 292, 392, 684 player. That's got to improve. And if it doesn't, then you are starting to look at situations. He's still got minor league options remaining. He doesn't have enough time to refuse an option. You've got a guy in Josh Smith who, if everybody is healthy, deserves a spot in the everyday lineup. So I don't know what the future holds, but there are a lot of guys who have got to either turn it around or face that. Like in the case of Heim and Garcia, they're probably not part of the picture next year. Josh Young should be part of the picture next year, but he's got to pick it up. Josh Smith has made himself a part of the future here. The jury is still out on Carter at this point, though there are times when he really shows great ability, and then there's times when you worry about whether or not he can stay healthy. And even Langford, I think Langford has he's basically this year. I think the Rangers would like to see a little bit more of a ascent, but he's done fine this year for a second year player.
Yeah, he is fine for second year player, but that's the thing. There was hope that he was going to be a superstar,
Right.
and I think usually when guys are superstars, they start out that way. You know, they there's not much of a runway before they've lifted off. Like he's been compared to Mike Trout. Well, go back and look at Mike Trout's record when he started out. Boom, he hit the ground running. Now, I still think that Wyatt Langford's a really good player, and I don't want to denigrate any of that at all, especially on this team, because frankly, where else do you start? And that's the other issue for me, Evan, is that it's not like there's a lot of guys knocking on the door. Justin Foscue, I don't think he's the answer. We see that Zeke Duran is who he is. That's the disappointing thing about me for this team is that maybe the direction this team needs to take offensively is that we got to get more guys in here who could work a count, who are going to be smart players, who are going to draw walks. We're going to have to learn to score in different ways than just waiting for somebody to hit a 3-run homer.
Agreed. And look, the teams that hit 3-run homers, by and large, they've got a few guys who will take walks, ahead of them. And they get to the middle of the bullpen, the soft side of the bullpen earlier in games. And this team does none of that. And I've not seen any real improvement when it comes to plate approach, or I don't want to say plate discipline, just approach. I'm not sure when the Rangers go to the plate, like what their approach is in that situation. I think I know what it should be, but I don't know if I know what it is.
No, I don't know either. It's and if you're watching them close up every night. I watch them a lot. It's a frustrating team to watch. I know that it's frustrating for fans as well. I think there'll be a lot of tough decisions made here, but I would be frankly at this point I would be shocked if Chris Young was a buyer at this point. I don't see how you could improve the offense at this point. It's as we've talked about. Before the season started, the big thing at the deadline was probably going to be a high leverage reliever, and what's the point of that at this point? I don't see it.
No, there's no point in that unless this team gets ridiculously hot in the next 2 weeks and moves above 500 and shows Chris Young that they can have a consistent offense and beat some good teams. They've got Seattle coming up. They've got San Diego coming up. They've got Houston coming up. They've got to beat some good teams and win some games convincingly.
Yeah, no question about that. All right. Before we get out of the podcast, I need to mention a few things, starting with the fact that Friday out at the American Airlines Center, Caitlin Clark's going to be in town with the Fever to play the Wings. So it's such a big event. They're going to move it from College Park Center over there at UT Arlington.
Are you going to that?
It does. I'm going to go out on Thursday. Friday night's bad deadlines for all you fans out there. Friday's a very bad deadline night for us, and so they decided they didn't want me to write off of that. They were afraid it wouldn't make the paper. So I'm going to write Thursday going into that game. This is a big game for the Wings, though, because it hasn't been a great debut for the Paige Becker's era. That's not her fault. It's everybody else's fault, essentially. And it's a good question of what are the new coaches.
I think Paige should say that.
Well, I'm interested to see that. What I'm interested in asking Paige about is that what do you think of all the abuse that Caitlin Clark takes on almost a nightly basis? The fact that Sophie Cunningham, one of her teammates, became a viral sensation because she finally took up for her is just phenomenal to me.
You've really kind of made it heighten my awareness of just how I don't want to say, look, the NBA is physical, but the fouls and the instigations in the WNBA certainly seem a lot more provocative than they do in the NBA, at least going back to the days of Dennis Rodman and Bill Laimbeer.
It's like WWE out there. I mean, there's no subtlety to any of it. Maybe I've told this story before, but when I was in high school, I was sitting on the floor at a game at Hoffenheim's Pavilion between the Rockets and the Celtics. And so, I'm just a teenager. My first real exposure to something like this up close. I'd watch games on television, of course, but not ever like this. And so little Calvin Murphy, 5'10", makes a great shot. And the crowd goes crazy. And so he's coming back down the floor towards me where I'm sitting. And Paul Silas, the big, hulking forward for the Celtics, is also coming back towards the floor. Well, the crowd's still going crazy about Calvin Murphy's shot. And they kind of cross at midcourt. And as they cross, Silas just almost imperceptibly raises his left knee just enough that when Calvin crosses in front of him, he trips over him and spills on the court. And Silas just keeps chugging on down the court like nothing happened. And I thought, see, that was how the NBA, players assert themselves, kind of subtly, but it's still with a devastating effect. Whereas what we're seeing in the WNBA is women pulling people's hair, and then just plowing into people out of nowhere, gouging people in the eye. Now, I realize in the NBA, guys are hitting people below the belt a few times, and I'm not saying that some cheap shots don't happen. But what's happening in the WNBA, and especially to a woman who has raised the level and raised everybody's boats, right? And there's apparently all this residual, envy, anger, or whatever towards Caitlin Clark, until finally one of her teammates had the gumption to say, hey, enough's enough. We're not having any of this anymore, because that's what you would see a lot of times is that somebody would make a cheap shot on Caitlin. She'd be sprawled on the floor, and one of her teammates would just kind of meekly walk over and help her up. It's like, that's not how it works in the NBA. If you're going to take a shot at my guy, I'm taking a shot at you. That's the way that it goes. But there's none of that going on, or not enough of that going on in the WNBA. So anyway, I don't think that Paige Beggars has seen that kind of, animosity. I don't think anybody else has, but I am interested to see what she may have to say about that. Also, this week, we've got LIV Golf out at Merido in Carrollton the second time. This will be the second round out there. I'm not going out this week, and I went out. I'll be doing the Rangers on Sunday, as a matter of fact. But I went last year, and I'm going to tell you this. That's a really tough course, and the players like it from that standpoint, but it was miserable out there. It was so hot. There's not a lot of shade out there. When fans, as I was walking the course, fans were telling the other fans, hey, there's some good trees on 14. There's some good trees. When people are asking where the trees are instead of where the best players are, that's not a good sign. The highs on Saturday and Sunday are projected to be 98 both days, 98 degrees. It is too hot in North Texas to be playing golf. It's too hot anywhere in Texas to be playing golf in June and July.
See, aren't you happy that I got you on the Rangers beat for Sunday so you can be in a nice, cool stadium?
Nice, cool stadium. That's the Rangers did do that for us, right? They put a lid on the new place, and I hope that no one here complains anymore about not playing over across the street. Can you imagine playing across the street now when the weather, the way that it is? I mean, it's brutal.
Look, the weather was like always Monday night in Baltimore. I don't know how people could stand it.
Well, I don't either. And that was the thing always too at the ballpark in Arlington across the street was that it was always 10 degrees hotter on the field than it was whatever the air temperature was supposed to be.
Oh, sure.
So miserable. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We hope you enjoyed it. We know it was a long one. We hope you hung around with us all the way to the very end. We appreciate that. We'll be back next week, talk more about how the draft went, hopefully how it went. We're going to talk more about the Rangers, if they're any closer to making Chris Young make a hard decision or not, and then anything else that develops along the way. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.